Hello, friends and clients of Walker Gates Bella. I am Jennifer Walker Gates, immigration attorney, here today with my colleague and associate attorney, Diego Nuñez. Hey, Diego.
Hi, Jennifer.
Diego and I are here today to talk about what to do if you discover that you've made a mistake on an immigration form. After you've submitted it, you discover that you've made a mistake, there's some kind of error in the form. Diego and I have been practicing, gosh, collectively longer than some of our viewers have been alive.
Yes.
So we have seen our share of mistakes and kind of the complications and problems they can cause. So this is really important for anyone going through the process who has figured out that like something that they submitted isn't correct. So before we get into the topic today, I want to take a second to encourage all of our viewers to hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are putting out regular material like this to help immigrants going through the process, whether you're working with us or another attorney or no attorney at all. We want to make sure everyone going through this process has really reliable, trustworthy information about how to handle it. So if that is you or someone you know, please hit subscribe, please share our channel, and stay tuned because we are going to be giving you more information each week. So, Diego, in my experience, and I don't know if this is what you see, but generally speaking, I have seen typically two different kinds of mistakes in immigration forms that clients submit, or even that we submit. As much as we check and double check and triple check, all of those pieces of data that are in one immigration case multiplied hundreds and thousands of times, it's just inevitable that a few things are going to slip through. And the two types of errors that I typically see are, number one, typographical errors. Maybe you miskey the spelling of a name or a date. And then more substantive errors like leaving off prior criminal history or a prior marriage, children, not listing family members, things like that. Is that generally your experience?
Yeah, definitely. The typographical errors are just going to always happen, especially sometimes when you've got in one typical adjustment status case, you've got 5 different applications that you're submitting, and yeah, in all those keystrokes, it's just bound to happen. And then there are some mistakes that happen. Maybe it's something that's left out by the attorney, or that's something that's left out by a client, not thinking that's applicable, that is a more substantive mistake that you want to correct so that it doesn't look like you're trying to deceive the immigration official that's going to review your case. And so
Yeah.
you have to take steps to fix these things. Some of them, even though they're small, they can be little mistakes can be big headaches. And then the substantive ones, well, those can be really big headaches because you don't want to be accused of misrepresenting yourself to get an immigration benefit that's going to create, additional problems in your case.
Yeah, that's right. So I think I'm going to first touch on what I do when I discover there's a typo in a case. Sometimes you can see in an immigration document, like when you submit a case to USCIS or Department of State, they initiate correspondence with you. They send receipt notices, they send emails, and on those, they list the name of the petitioner and beneficiary, or whoever the applicant is will be listed. Sometimes you can see clearly on their document that there is a misspelling in the name. And sometimes that's the mistake of whoever submitted the application. And sometimes it's the mistake of the agent on the other side who was entering the information into the computer system. That also happens a lot. So if either of those things has happened and we see it on the documentation, then we go on to uscis.gov if it's a USCIS case. There's actually a link on that page for correcting a typo. How to correct a typo is available there, and you can submit what's called an e-service request to correct the misspelling or the incorrect date or whatever it may be. Now, these things are actually really important, even though they're not likely to result most often in like a denial of your case. They could create a delay in the form of a request for evidence. Or if the case gets approved with the typo in place, then it becomes harder to get your social security card. And then you may have documents that don't match your passport and things that are complications of that nature. So an e-service request is what we do with USCIS if it is a USCIS case. If it is a case with Department of State or National Visa Center, we will send correspondence directly to them, sometimes with attached birth certificates or whatever the document may be that was that the typo applies to, and request correction. Now, what's really important for any of these cases is to keep a record of your effort to correct mistake. Often, in my experience, and I don't know if you've seen this, but requests for corrections don't necessarily get attended to right away, if at all. Sometimes you can submit requests for corrections and they don't get corrected. And sometimes you have to do it several times. You have to follow up. So in my experience, it's really, really important to keep a record of efforts to correct things. Is that what you've seen as well, Diego?
Definitely. And you want to do that in either type of case, typographical, when you're making a typographical error, request to be fixed, and also the substantive. And the reason that you want to have that is that in case, let's say it's a type of application that's going to get interviewed, you want to be able to show the officer at the time of the interview the effort that was taken in order to get this mistake corrected. So it's important to always keep a record of the type of error that you're trying to fix. And if you're represented, you should definitely bring it to the attention of the attorney so that the attorney makes the correction. That way, that effort is going to be in the file. I don't recommend clients to try on their own to fix the situation, even if they think it's something that they can do easily. Sometimes that effort is not communicated directly to the attorney, or somehow it's lost, 5-6 months later when it's time to have the case interviewed. So have your representative fix that mistake. If you're doing it yourself, well, make copies of what you're sending. If you're mailing something, have the tracking history and be able and have that confirmation of delivery so that you can show immigration that not only did you attempt to fix it, but that you also were able to confirm the delivery of the corrective information, so that it's on them to make to make that correction, and not to accuse you of making that mistake or not trying to fix it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think, if you are working with an attorney, this is another mistake that I see sometimes, is that clients are working with an attorney, but they don't realize that they should allow their representative to be the primary channel of communications. There's nothing that says clients are disallowed from contacting immigration on their own if they are represented by an attorney, but it can disrupt the flow of information and communication. Immigration can cancel an attorney's notice of appearance if they think that's what they're supposed to do. I've seen that happen before. And then if the attorney isn't in the loop about what's happening, it does create confusion. So we always tell clients, please allow us to be your representative with immigration at all times. Please don't call them or communicate with them on your own unless we instruct you otherwise in a particular circumstance, because it can disrupt the flow of communication from them. So, Diego, what about when people have made an error, by trying to make their application look as pretty or put the information they think immigration wants to know or see or hear, and they realize later that it wasn't complete or correct, how do you handle those situations?
All right, so that is, that can be a very important, you know, uh, problem to fix. So one of the common mistakes that I see um, is individuals that have a criminal history, and let's say that it was a misdemeanor charge, and maybe it's not something that would affect their ability to fix status. Maybe it will be, but they think that because the maybe the probation was completed and the fines have been paid, that the problem goes away. And meaning that it goes away, no one has to know about it because it disappears. I've had this conversation throughout the years, who knows how many times, but people will literally ask, do I have to report something that happened many years ago? Like, doesn't that just automatically go away? And it doesn't. And so they neglect not just putting it down on the application, but they also neglect on informing the attorney of the mistake. So we are not aware of it. And I've had it where it comes up um, at the time of the interview, where it does look bad because you're not aware of it, you're not prepared, for that information to come forward, and the client was not trying to deceive anybody, but by keeping it away, not informing anybody, I think the automatic assumption that's going to be made by that officer is that you were trying to keep that out. You were trying to deceive, you know.
Totally. Yes. And I mean, this is something I think we've published this in emails. We've been repeating this message that, like, for immigration, arrests never go away. um,
No.
and it's an honest mistake for in many cases, because criminal defense attorneys tell their clients, like, we're going to get this done. The judge is going to give you deferred adjudication. And when they do that, that means, like, you never have to mention it again. It's as though it never happened. But what those defense attorneys are not thinking about is the immigration system, where it never goes away. You always have to disclose. Now, when it comes to applying for a job or applying for a place to rent or something like that, it's true, you may not ever have to mention it again. But when you're applying for anything related to immigration, you have to disclose always. And so, yeah, getting charges expunged can be quite complex when we need those records um, for immigration cases, and the client has gotten them expunged and decided they no longer exist, and with good reason. But then it makes it harder also for immigration. So if you do have an arrest of any sort, always have to list those on the forms.
Yeah, the criminal defense attorneys, let's say in Texas in particular, when they're giving that advice, they're looking at it on a state law point of view. For
That's right.
example, when there is a deferred prosecution or you get the case expunged, then you can truthfully, under oath, if you are being, if you've had a case expunged, you can say, I've never been arrested if you're under oath in a state proceeding. However, that doesn't work the same way with immigration. You still have to inform them. Yes, there was this arrest. It was dismissed. I got it expunged, and so what you do try to to provide that information, if we're aware of it before it's ever interviewed. Um, I do try to make a record. I do submit it under the case number, and I know that sometimes it's not going to get to that file. But when we get to that interview, even before it starts, I can tell the officer, we attempted to make this correction. I have this paperwork here. Would you like to see it now or when we review the criminal history? And then other mistakes, trying to make your case look pretty. It might be not naming that children that were born outside of the relationship, or providing information on a prior marriage. Maybe the marriage was even annulled. Again, these are things that have to be reported. And sometimes immigration gets very angry or or worked up when these things are omitted, because they might think that you may have been married and not correctly divorced, and so that marriage that you're trying to fix your status through is not considered valid and it's void by law. And maybe they think that you're trying to commit some sort of misrepresentation, trying to get that benefit, and then you're going to maybe pursue um, status for your children and for your ex or for your spouse. Um, and so I've seen it where this comes up, not during the adjustment of status, but maybe at the point when the individual does get status and they decide that they want to petition for their children. And that's when immigration finds out you never named these children in your initial application. And so then they want marriage records, civil records, things like that to confirm whether there was a marital relationship with the mother of the children. And so these are the types of mistakes where you want to send, the correct information in the form of an addendum or a legal memo. You want to provide the records to show, what the correct information is, and you're going to want to have that copied and in the file so that when you're going to get interviewed, again, it can be presented to the officer so that it doesn't become a bigger problem than it should be.
Yeah. I've been, reviewing a bunch of cases recently involving, criminal history, fraudulent marriages. And in cases like that, something important for people to know is that even if USCIS grants someone lawful permanent resident status, and they do so having made a mistake about, like, let's say the applicant discloses their criminal history and it's a serious matter involving drug trafficking or something like that. And then USCIS, mistakenly approves their resident status. And this has happened quite a bit. That does not mean that that person is going to get to keep that resident status forever. And in cases like that, we recommend, and I've seen it involved. I've seen it where it involved marriage fraud as well. Obvious marriage fraud where by the time the couple went for their adjustment interview, they were already divorced, but they pretended like they weren't. And in cases like that, we always let people know that if you apply for naturalization in a case like that, or if you travel outside the United States, you could be subject to removal proceedings and having that resident status stripped from you. It is not considered lawfully acquired. Even if you disclosed everything to immigration, but they made a mistake, if they make a mistake and give that person resident status, even though they're not supposed to, it's not considered lawfully acquired. You won't be eligible for naturalization, and your status could be in jeopardy in that case as well. So that's not generally like based on a mistake that a person makes in the immigration context, but a preceding mistake that then gets disclosed can also create some long-term havoc in a person's case.
I usually explain this to when I see that there was a mistake done by immigration, and people say, well, then they made the mistake, so why should I have to pay for it? Unfortunately, you pay for your own mistakes, and many times you will pay for immigration's mistakes.
Correct.
But not always. Now, there is some sort of typographical or substantive mistakes that immigration might do where you may not necessarily have to pay for it. And I'm referring to a work permit or a permanent resident card that has been issued where it is obvious that the mistake came from USCIS. In those circumstances, for example, in the actual form to replace a green card or permanent resident card, there is a section where you can mark off that the mistake was by USCIS. you do have to return that mistaken, that card with the error, but immigration will not charge you to fix their mistake. And so those are one of the few circumstances where you may not necessarily pay for it, but you may not have that identification that you want to have to prove your stats.
So I think in summary, if you discover a typographical error on your case, it's really, really important to correct it as soon as possible. Keep a record of your efforts to correct it, and anticipate that you might have to follow up and do some extra work to get it corrected. If you're working with an attorney, bring it to their attention and let them do it. And if it's a substantive error, I would say don't try to correct a substantive error on your own. Diego, what do you think? Should people go to an attorney to correct an error where they've maybe left off an arrest or left off a marriage or a divorce or a child or something along those lines?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I know, like, sometimes you might not be able to, or you may think it's not worth it. But remember, the mistake is usually paid by you. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So get an attorney and have them nip it in the bud, get it fixed.
Possible. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's get some help for sure with that one. That's a big deal. So if you have any questions or concerns about something that could have been submitted incorrectly in your case, or you just want additional information about your immigration case or your eligibility for benefits, please reach out to us at Walker Gates Vela. You can find us online at walkergatesvela.com. On our website, there is a button that you can click to schedule with us directly. You can schedule with me or with Diego directly from our website. And we'll be happy to help you figure out what needs to be done and, let you know whether it makes sense to hire us to help or whether you can correct something on your own. And Diego, thank you so much for taking time today to share your experience and knowledge. Is there anything else we need to let people know before we sign off?
Well, I think you've summarized it all perfectly. The one thing I think that they should understand, mistakes can be fixed. So don't just let it don't just let it lie. Make the attempt to fix it. But yeah.
Yeah. Great advice. So, all right. Well, we will be back again in the next week or so with another update. So please stay tuned, subscribe, share, and thanks again, Diego.
All right. Until next time.
All right.